Hello and a warm welcome to New Central Studios. I'm Felicity Ezewike, here with the stories making headlines beyond the continent. Reza Zabib, ambassador of the Islamic Republic of Iran in Spain, says that if Israel attacks Iran, its reaction will be much stronger. He also declares that Iran is against war and calls on the supporters of the regime to stop their trend of aggression against other nations. This is coming after former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett on Wednesday called for a decisive strike to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities after the Islamic Republic fired a barrage of missiles at Israel.
Well, no, we are against war. We don't see if see it necessary. And we call upon the supporter of regime to stop it on its trend of aggression against other nations and countries in the region. But we will react. As I mentioned, if there could be any aggression, we will react. But we are more than capable to defend ourselves, and this yesterday's response is a good indication of that. No, we are satisfied and we are happy. According to our information, almost 90% of the missiles reached their targets. But if they wish to think so.
The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has been banned from entering Israel over his response to Iran's ballistic missile bombardment. In a statement, Israel's Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, called Guterres an anti-Israel Secretary General who lent support to terrorists. Following Iran's approximately 180 missile launch into Israel, Guterres wrote on social media platform X, denouncing the broadening of the Middle East conflict with escalation after escalation and declaring that these must stop. In a statement on Wednesday, Katz declared the UN Secretary General persona non grata, saying that anyone who cannot unequivocally condemn Iran's heinous attack on Israel does not deserve to step foot on Israeli soil. Israel's UN ambassador, Danny Danon, at the UN headquarters in a press briefing says United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres must name Iran as the aggressor in this conflict in the Middle East. Israel had earlier declared Guterres persona non grata, saying he fails to condemn Iran's missile attack on Israel.
And I expect the Secretary General today, when he comes to the Security Council in a few minutes, to say it very clearly who is the aggressor in this conflict, in this attack of Iran against Israel, and not to call both sides, and not to put us in the same place. It's like if the UN was not here during World War II, but imagine that the UN would put a statement that would call Nazi Germany and the allies to de-escalate. You don't do that. Thank you very much, the Council. And yesterday, when we are being attacked by a member state of the UN, 180 ballistic missiles, 10 million people running to shelters, the statement he put out basically calling for de-escalation, not mentioning Iran, not mentioning who is the aggressor, who is self-defending its people. That moral equation is detached from reality. And that's why we could not accept that. And I expect
UN Chief Antonio Guterres has condemned Iran's missile attack against Israel following criticism by Israel that he hadn't specifically called out Tehran when he initially condemned the broadening conflict. The Secretary General, while speaking at an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, called after Iran on Tuesday launched a massive missile barrage at Israel, which has ramped up its offensive against Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Should have been obvious yesterday in the context of the condemnation I expressed, I again strongly condemn yesterday's massive missile attack by Iran on Israel. And these attacks, paradoxically, do nothing to support the cause of the Palestinian people or reduce their suffering.
The Russian Foreign Ministry says Moscow is extremely concerned by the latest escalation in the Middle East after Iran fired what it said were 200 missiles on Israel and sent civilians rushing into shelters. The ministry's spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, has accused the United States of bearing a significant share of responsibility for the degradation of the situation in the Middle East. In the meantime, world leaders have called on Iran and Israel to step back from the brink after Tehran fired a barrage of rockets at its arch-rival.
Хотел еще раз подчеркнуть, в Москве крайне обеспокоены очередным опасным витком эскалации на Ближнем Востоке. Мы неоднократно предупреждали, что неурегулированность целого ряда кризисов в этой части мира, в первую очередь палестино-израильского конфликта, чреваты масштабным обострением ситуации. Считаем, что значительную долю ответственности не только в историческом контексте в целом, но особая, конечно, ответственность за деградацию обстановки в нынешней ситуации несут именно.
The IDF has announced the deaths of 7 more soldiers who were killed during fighting in southern Lebanon today. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent his condolences to the families of the fallen soldiers in a video statement shortly after the IDF announced their deaths. The commandos were all killed during a gun battle with Hezbollah operatives in a southern Lebanon village, along with Captain Eitan Oster, whose death was announced earlier. Let's cross now live to News Centre's senior international correspondent, Adeshawa Josh, who joins us from Istanbul. Adeshawa, the situation appears to have simmered down a little compared to what we had on Tuesday night. What more can you tell us about the conflict?
Well, Felicity, the situation is still intense. We saw that Israel has continued its ground invasion of southern Lebanon, and that Hezbollah claimed that it would push back some IDF soldiers at the border. And it also claims that the group claimed that it inflicted some damages on IDF soldiers. And a couple of hours ago, we saw that.
All right, Adeshawa, we apologize. The audio from your end is pretty poor. We might try to get back to you subsequently. Let's head on now to the U.S., where Tuesday night's vice presidential debate between Republican J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Walz felt like a civil and relatively restrained conversation about the issues at the top of American voters' minds going into the November 5 election. In that, it was unlike the 2 presidential debates earlier this year. For News Central, Chief International Correspondent Afia Hagan has more.
Tim Walz and J.D. Vance have defended their respective running mates during their first and possibly only vice presidential debate. Hosted by CBS News, the event gave the pair the chance to introduce themselves and go on the attack against the opposing ticket. Both were asked at the beginning of the debate whether they would support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran.
The expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack.
Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Abortion was another hot-button topic, where J.D. Vance accused the Democratic Party of being too radical.
We have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance.
The clearest divide of the night came when Walz put Vance on the spot during a discussion of the January 6th insurrection and Trump's false claims that he won the 2020 election.
On January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this.
the debate is unlikely to change the trajectory of the presidential race, which meant the two running mates were cordial with each other, training their attacks instead on the tops of the opposing tickets and focusing largely on policy differences. Neither was declared a clear winner, though Vance was viewed as more polished, with Walz showing some nerves in his first debate. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagan.
More on the US elections. I'm joined by Afia Hagan. Afia, tell us who won this debate between Walz and Vance, if you can.
Well, to be honest, there was no real clear winner, although it's thought that J.D. Vance was definitely more prepared and more polished, and Tim Walz was showing much more nerves. Remember, this was his first debate, and actually when he was nominated for the vice presidential pick by Kamala Harris, that's one of the things he said to her, that he never debated before and he wasn't great in debates. Now, this debate was really more about the two men promoting their top party bills, you know, their picks for president, promoting Trump and promoting Harris, and talking about what they would do and trying to make them look good. That was really the point. But even in this debate, which was quite even-tempered compared to the two debates we've seen in the past, Trump and Biden and Trump and Harris, with few political body blows, it was more policy-focused. This was about them really setting up the top ticket. So no clear winner, so to speak, but Vance certainly coming across as more polished than Tim Walz.
So what's next for the campaign now that the vice presidents have had their debate?
Well, the next few days of the campaign are quite pertinent. The campaign trail is back alive today. So Tim Walz will be heading to Pennsylvania, whilst J.D. Vance is heading to Michigan, and Donald Trump is going to be in Texas. He's just pulled out of a planned interview with CBS News. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris is heading to Georgia, and she will be visiting areas that have been heavily affected by Hurricane Helene, which sort of swept across that part of the world from last Friday, and looking at the emergency response to that. It's also thought that the Vice President will be traveling to North Carolina also to see the effects of the storm in the coming days. Governor Tim Walz, the vice presidential candidate, is also expected to sit down for some national TV interviews. That isn't something that we've really seen him do at all. He was interviewed by CNN alongside Kamala Harris. That's in comparison to J.D. Vance, who seems to do these interviews all the time. You know, he's always on the kind of main networks. But Tim Walz is going to be gearing up for some of those also in the coming days.
All right, Afia, thank you for speaking with us. All right, let's reconnect with News Central's senior international correspondent, Adeshowa Josh. She joins us from Istanbul. We had to interrupt earlier due to the audio. We have that sorted, hopefully now. Before you went off, you were giving us an update on, I mentioned that the situation seemed to have simmered down compared to Tuesday night, and you were giving us an update as to where the conflict is now.
Well, let's just hope my audio is better, because sometimes we get our lines scrambled for security reasons, but I hope I'm able to give you an update for as long as my audio is better. The situation is pretty much still intense. Israel is still bombarding and also invading. That's the ground invasion of southern Lebanon. Hezbollah said that it was able to repel some of IDF soldiers from the southern part of Lebanon, and that it inflicted some damage on IDF soldiers. And we saw that a couple of hours ago, the IDF indeed confirmed that 7 of its soldiers had died while doing a face-off with Hezbollah at the southern border a couple of hours ago. So what we see is a continuous bombardment by Israel of southern Lebanon and parts of Beirut suburbs, areas that Hezbollah considers civilian targets. Also, not too long ago, we saw that Israel has ramped up its bombardment of the Gaza Strip, killing dozens of people, including targets in shelters and homes and orphanages. So this situation has all but tilted over the edge from what we saw last night. But the killing spree on both sides continues, as well as rhetorics. We heard from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, that Israel will respond to Iran's attack on Tuesday in due course, and described the attack as a big mistake. Iran, on its part, says, well, that it is not going to attack Israel again, provided Israel does not respond to the barrage of ballistic missiles it hurled on Tel Aviv on Tuesday.
Yeah, you talked about the UN chief's response, but I want you to talk about the implication of him being declared a persona non grata at a time when the world body is trying to get a ceasefire deal.
UN Chief Antonio Guterres, from the get-go, has been very critical of the situation in Gaza. Without doubt, he has condemned Hamas's attack on October 7th on Israel, but he has not shied away from calling out how Israel has reacted to the attack, describing it, especially condemning the killing of young people, women and children, as well as UN aid workers, the killing of UN aid workers, dozens of journalists in the line of duty, not to mention Israel's blatant disregard of the measures and rulings of the International Court of Justice. So Israel coming out to declare UN Chief Antonio Guterres persona non grata is one way of indicating its discontent over what appears to be Israel's, UN Chief's lack of support for Israel's cause. Now, coming out publicly to say Israel is not supporting us would continue to foster discord within the UN body, and of course an opportunity for a consensus of a ceasefire might become even more elusive, to say the least.
The G7 nations have released a statement vowing to work together to reduce tensions in the Middle East, and they also have started that a diplomatic solution is still possible. What do you make of this?
So the G7 comprises the United States and its key Western allies. And these key Western allies would always usually go along with whatever the stance of the United States is over Israel. At this point in time, under the Biden administration, it is that the United States is given unconditional support to Israel, whatever Israel chooses to do with its war. So we can read the statements as saying that the United States and its allies will continue to support Israel in achieving its peace. On the other hand, is Iran. Iran is currently in Qatar for a summit to rally opposition against Israel. I was reading on my feed a couple of minutes ago about also Saudi Arabia, that there's the convening in Saudi Arabia already. What this is beginning to look like at this time is a coalition on both sides, West versus East. And this could be very detrimental to the very peace that both sides are trying to advance at this point. In the eventuality of a war, this is indeed a very, very dangerous precedent for felicity.
Adesua, thank you for the perspective. We will, I'm sure, get back to you in the coming days. Away from that, hundreds of people remain missing after catastrophic flooding decimated towns and destroyed roads and cut off power for more than 1 million homes in the U.S. Southeast. The death toll has continued to rise since Hurricane Helen, which was later downgraded to a tropical storm, tore across the region. 176 people have been confirmed dead across 6 states, a figure that is expected to grow. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden has deployed an additional 1,000 active duty soldiers to bolster aid efforts in the southeastern U.S. after the region was pummeled by Hurricane Helen. In Europe, the French National Assembly's Law Committee overwhelmingly rejected by 54 votes to 15 a motion for the impeachment of President Emmanuel Macron, tabled by La France Insoumise, which criticizes the head of state for not respecting the results of the legislative elections. The test aims to bring the President of the Republic before the two joint chambers of Parliament with a view to impeachment for failure to fulfill his duties manifestly incompatible with the exercise of his mandate. However, only the elected representatives of the rebellious communist and environmentalist groups voted in favor.
Chers collègues, votant 69, exprimé 69, la majorité étant donc à 35, pour 15, contre 54. Je vous remercie.
And that's all we have for you on Beyond the Continent at this hour. Do send your eyewitness reports to the number showing now on your screen. You can follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, we're on Avo TV and on YouTube. As always, thank you for watching.